People of Earth, we are back. The STARLOG Podcast is in your ears. I am Jordan Hoffman, broadcasting to you live from Center Neptune with another week packed with information about science fiction, science fact, deep lore, the STARLOG Archives, fun missives from our listeners, and recording it all is our producer, Dave Gonzalez. Dave, how are you this week?
Good. You haven't lobotomized me to turn me into a humanoid robot yet, Jordan.
Oh my gosh. We're talking about the black hole today because our special guest this week is a fellow by the name of Professor Scott Hughes. But he is a professor at M.I.T. and his specialty is black holes. He's like kind of the guy. He's Captain Black Hole. He's one of the most important black holeniacs out there in the galaxy. And he's going to talk to us a lot about black holes today. Why? Why? Because we love you. Just because black holes are awesome. And I would like to know more. You know, listeners out there can reach us and me and you through all sorts of methods. There's the social media method on following STARLOG Media on Facebook, on Instagram, blah, blah, blah. But also good old-fashioned email. You're Dave at STARLOG. I'm Jordan at STARLOG. That's Jordan with an A, not Jordan with an O. And we're also, and you know, if you read the Lodestar newsletter, which you can sign up for at starlog.com, you will get the Lodestar in your inbox every Friday, and you could always just hit reply to that, and it'll get to me. But what's exciting is that in a previous episode, we were talking about Jurassic Park because our guest was David Koepp, the screenwriter of Jurassic Park. Mm-hmm. And we found in the archives an old interview with Kathleen Kennedy, producer of Jurassic Park, and of course, who later ran Lucasfilms, a very important filmmaker. And in that interview, she said that Richard Attenborough, who of course played Dr. Oldman in Jurassic Park, Hammond, of course, Dr. Hammond, who played Dr. Hammond, and it was a great get for them because she said, quote, "We've been trying to get him in a movie for a while." And you and I started scratching our heads saying, what movie could it have been? But listener Nick, out there in the internet, he wrote the following. Steven Spielberg wanted Sir Richard for the role of Toodles in Hook, but Dickie was busy making his own film. And I went and fact-checked this on the internet, and listener Nick is correct. So hats off to you, listener Nick. So that's what's going on there. But now I think is a good time to talk about what's happening new in science fiction. Now, we've been talking, Dave, a lot about movies, a lot about television. And, you know, obviously when you talk about sci-fi, you're talking about books and comics. Mm-hmm. But what about another art form that involves sci-fi? You know, it doesn't always have to be movies and visual stuff. What about the art form of rock music, specifically progressive rock? Because right now, if you're listening to this fairly new to when it's been released, out there on the internet, and maybe even in stores if you still buy CDs or records, there is a very new rock album by the band Muse. I love Muse. Not everybody does. When Muse first hit, everybody was like, they sound a lot like Radiohead. They're ripping off Radiohead. To which I say, hot take alert, red alert, Radiohead wishes. I feel that Muse is a much more consistent band than Radiohead. Radiohead has a lot of clunkers, in my opinion. I like Radiohead. I like the Bends. I like OK Computer. Those are masterpieces. I think the newer stuff is not my favorite, but Muse is always doing their crazy prog rock, math rock, big anthemic, quasi-Queen-esque rock. And the point is this, their newest album, which is new and out now, the 10th album, is called The Wow Signal.
Oh, hey.
And to most, yeah, right, there you go. To most people, they hear, oh, it's called The Wow Signal. Great title. But to you and I, to those of us that listen to the STARLOG podcast, we know exactly what the Wow Signal is. The Wow Signal is a term dating back to 1977 when a big fat radio telescope called the Big Ear, based at the Ohio State University, caught something strange out there when it was searching for extraterrestrial life. And if you look on a graph, it goes whoop. And then whoever was looking at it wrote, wow, next to it. And to this day, they don't really know what it was. Now, there are some who are like, clearly, that's aliens trying to talk to us. And then there have been other theories of what it could be. But this is what excites me, Dave. Most of the theories have been debunked. That's the wow signal. Now, Matt Bellamy, the main dude from Muse, has used this as a metaphor for the 10th album, which happens to be also an album of songs that he wrote after he divorced his beautiful model wife. So he wrote a bunch of sad songs, but because he's Matt Bellamy, and there have been plenty of other sci-fi. I mean, their first big hit, Supermassive Black Hole, and also Knights of Sidonia, which is all about Mars. There's a song called Cryogen, which, is really about, your heart is on ice, man, because your beautiful model wife left you. Mm-hmm. But it's also about cryogenics, works in two ways. And then the first song on the album, which might be my favorite, is called The Dark Forest, which of course is the title of the second book in the Three Body Problem trilogy. And The Dark Forest is a theory, an answer to the Fermi paradox, right? So the Fermi paradox is why, if there's so many planets out there, man, and there must be so many planets with intelligent life, why have we on Earth never been contacted? And one of the possible answers is called the Dark Forest theory, which is that any intelligent creature would stay hidden, because if you're available to be discovered, you're probably going to get conquered. So if you're intelligent enough, you stay hidden in the dark forest, or if not, you attack. So those who subscribe to this theory should say we're very lucky that we haven't been contacted, because if we ever get discovered, we're getting destroyed. And that's a lot of that is in the Three Body Problems second book. So anyhow, just to conclude here, the wow signal is the science fiction rock record of the year, at least until something new comes up. Maybe King Gizzard and the Wizard Lizard have something else coming our way. But there was an interview in NME between Matt Bellamy and the interviewer wrote, if you were to reply to the wow signal to send something back to the aliens, what would you say? And Matt Bellamy said, I'm going to do his accent. We come in peace. I don't really know what he talks like. I know what he sings like with a big operatic voice, but I don't know what he speaks like. We come in peace. What else can you say? That's essential. We don't know what's out there. It's naive to presume that all life that's not on this planet is good. I mean, we're certainly not. He's making a good point there. Even though the universe is full of beauty and creation, it's also full of misery and destruction. Oh man, this guy just got dumped. It's all full of misery and destruction. It's very possible that another life form out there could want to destroy us or take the planet for whatever reason. I think we have to be careful. So we come in peace would be the prime message. I have to agree. Dave, I'm going to tell you now what's new in Sci-Fact. Now, this episode of the STARLOG Podcast is transmitting to listeners on the 15th. No, what is the 15th of July, right?
That's
today
correct,
is.
yeah.
So if you listen to this a day late, you're too late, because today, right now, July 15th is the last day of bidding at Sotheby's Auction House for another collection of science and NASA and space trinkets. Now, they've done this several times in the past. They boast of being the number one place to buy a science NASA astronaut or also cosmonaut thingamabob. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they boast that in 2022, somebody spent $2.8 million on Buzz Aldrin's flight suit. And listen, if you're Elon Musk or Bezos or even Tom Hanks, 2.8's probably enough to Tom Hanks probably feels it, but Bezos, who loves space, and Musk, who loves space, they don't even 2.8 million is a blow in your nose and a handkerchief. So I don't know who bought it, but if you're super rich, it's a good thing to have. So the Aldrin estate, I mean, Aldrin's still with us, but the Buzz Aldrin family has done now. This is their third time. They did a big auction in 2022, in 2024, and in 2026. Right now, They're doing a biggie. The 2024 one was a lot of Aldrin stuff. And it's basically like the family's like, hey, Uncle Buzz, check under the couch. Is there anything else you could sell? Because they're making a lot of money out of this. And it's the current space auction at Sotheby's is not just Buzz Aldrin stuff, but he's the lion's share. There's a lot of cool cosmonaut stuff and also other NASA astronauts. But if you're super into Buzz, you can get some of his term papers from West Point. You can get a Soviet flag that he brought with him personally to the moon, which is cool because a lot of flags of all the flags of the nations were brought on Apollo 11 and then given to their nation states. So but I guess Aldrin brought seconds just because he knew this day was coming and he'd want to sell them. And if you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, Dave, go down the rabbit hole of what became of all the flags that were on Apollo 11. Most of them are in a museum. Like the original Soviet one is still in a museum in Moscow.
That's only second to the rabbit hole of we had to form an agency to reclaim the moon rocks. Like Apollo... The government, what happens, I guess, when you get a government funded space program like I was advocating for in this show in an earlier episode is, I guess, like a whole bunch of like leak. Like I have great respect for people putting together these very great collections for an auction, but they are all Indiana Jones villains. All these things belong in a museum. I don't think you should be able to purchase Buzz Aldrin's spacesuit for $2.8 million. I think that should be in a museum. Anyway, we do want to talk about something that was in the Smithsonian, at least for a little bit.
Yeah.
Now is your chance to purchase a Smithsonian exhibit.
Exactly. So other cool things in there, flags. Buzz Aldrin, of course, was born in New Jersey, so he has a New Jersey flag, a tiny piece of ablative plating from the heat shields available, a tie pin, a copy of Jules Verne's From the Earth to the Moon signed by 10 Apollo astronauts. That's a cool thing to have.
That is cool, yeah.
An old lamp from Apollo 15. But here's the kicker. And the auction hasn't happened yet, but they're expecting big bucks from this. If you look at it, a picture, you say, what the hell is that? It's like it looks like a plastic button, like a thing on like a snap for a pair of jeans, but plastic and brown and ugly. And then a dented old pen. Who wants a dented pen? Why is it so important? Well, it's the pen that, if you want to look at it a certain way, saved Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong's life. Now, for those who really know their Apollo 11 lore, they know that after the first walk on the moon, the guys come back into the capsule to go to sleep and do whatever. And they had these giant backpacks on. And although Neil thinks it was Buzz and Buzz thinks it was Neil, most people agree it was actually Buzz that did it. He moved his back and smashed into a bunch of stuff on the wall in the tiny little capsule. And he knocked out a little, a switch, a circuit breaker switch. And as it happened, it was a very important one. It was the one for the engine, it was called engine arm switch. Basically, that circuit needed to be complete in order to get the LEM, the Eagle, off the moon back to the command module where Michael Collins was waiting for them so they could all go back to Earth. Now, the jury's still out. Would the ship have gone up without it we don't know. But when you're on the moon for the first time, you take a better safe than sorry approach.
Yes.
So they go, oh crap, they noticed this little piece of plastic on the floor and the guys went, oh crap, what are we going to do? We got to get it. We got to get something back in this thing. And the thing is, they didn't know what to do. And at first, Buzz Aldrin was like, well, I can stick my finger in there. Yeah. And they're like, no, you're going to get electrocuted. That's not going to work.
What a way to lose the first man in space.
Right.
So then my finger in it.
The other thing they tried to do is they were looking for other little gewgaws in the capsule that they could do, but it was mostly metal. And if they put a metal thing in there, it ran the risk of frying all the circuits, and they really would have been screwed. They needed a piece of plastic. Now, it was lucky that they had an aluminum pen with a plastic tip called a Duro rocket pen. Now, these were one of many, there were a couple of different pen companies that made pens for the space program because it was felt tipped and it wouldn't, the ink would work in no gravity. So they're like, oh, lucky we got this pen. And they just kind of shoved it in there. They shoved the pen with the tip, plastic tip in the thing, in the LEM, and like, all right, let's get back to Earth from the moon. This is the greatest accomplishment in the history of science, the history of mankind. Hopefully this pen will work. And it did work because Buzz and Neil made it back. And thank God. So this is, if you want to look at it a certain way, the pen that saved their lives is a dopey looking, regular looking pen. I mean, it is chrome looking. It looks kind of futuristic. And the little piece of plastic that fell off, Buzz Aldrin pocketed it and saved it. And now he's selling it. So there is an estimate. What do you think Sotheby's thinks they're going to get for the pen and the little piece of plastic and a provenance, a little note from Buzz Aldrin that's been notarized explaining kind of what I just explained to you, but in more formal terms?
If we're talking about the where I would like the value to be, it is in the history, it is in the note. And I would say, like, man, I don't know, 200 grand. Like, maybe that would, like, because it's a pen and a piece of plastic and a note. Yeah. And the note is like really great in the story, but that authenticates it. Yeah. Otherwise, I don't even know if there would be a way to like chemically authenticate a pen that has been under Buzz Aldrin's couch for, you know, 4 years. You got to take it on faith. All right. The answer is Sotheby's estimates a high. They think they can get as much as 1.2 million. Now, when we record next week, we're going to check in and see what they actually got. But they think some schmendrick, I mean, maybe Tom Hanks, maybe Bezos, or somebody we don't know, or maybe a lot of people who are pretty rich but not that rich are going to pool their resources and share it. I don't know. But they think 1.2 million, to which I say, you know, this is an American space program, NASA. This is not Russian cosmonauts. What's more American than finding some old crap and putting a dollar value on it and getting every dime you can? God damn it. That's what won the space race. That's what got us on the moon, defeated the Soviet Union, was ridiculous greed. And I salute Buzz Aldrin for getting 1.2 million for his old pen. What can I say? He is the only American astronaut that has met Optimus Prime. So you got to give him that.
Optimize your deflector dish, because we have just entered the STARLOG Archive. This week's guest, as you know, is Professor Scott Hughes, who is one of the foremost authorities on black holes. So we figured, why not? It's time to talk about Disney's mega flop, The Black Hole, a movie.
It's finally time to talk about it. You've asked two questions. When is STARLOG coming back as a magazine? And now we have the answer to that. And then when is the STARLOG podcast going to talk about Disney's The Black Hole? And we're bringing it to you now as soon as possible.
The Black Hole was a very important movie for STARLOG because, say what you will about it, it was an important release in terms of special effects, in terms of, you know, anticipation. There's a lot of black hole material. The movie, of course, came out around Christmas time, 1979. So if you look, and I have it here for those who watch this on YouTube, I have a physical. This is from the Hoffman division of the archives. This is a physical copy of STARLOG number 31. It came out in February of 1980. Now it says February, which means that really it was on the shelves in January. The movie came out at Christmas. So this is concurrent with the release. The movie's in theaters right now, and you got a big, fat, beautiful black hole cover. And in the issue, there is an interview with Ron Miller, producer of the Black Hole, who was also the head of production at Disney. Now, Ron Miller's an interesting character because Ron Miller's reign does involve a lot of very notable films. And I believe that listen, I want to live in a world where the Black Hole from Disney exists. I don't think it's a good movie, but I like that it's out there. And a lot of the interview is debunking rumors. So a lot of the rumors at the time was that the movie was PG. That's true. And it was the first Disney PG movie, which apparently was much more controversial than I ever realized. So Miller's kind of defending it, saying, hey, it's PG mainly for the intensity. And if you watch The Black Hole, there's not a lot. I mean, intensity, it's a pretty dull movie, although the deaths are pretty intense. I will say when Anthony Perkins gets screwed to death by the Maximilian the robot, it is kind of intense. So he's like, look, there's a couple of hells and damns in there, which I could imagine Ernest Borgnine saying, you're a damn fool, So that was enough to give them a PG, but there was intense backlash. To quote the interview, an announcement in the daily papers said that the rating was due to the use of 4-letter words. And apparently this announcement did not go unnoticed in the Bible Belt. And the studio, even a month before the release of the picture, had been deluged by unkind mail. Miller says that they had read the announcement and immediately imagined the F word. And there are just a few hells and damns put to dramatic effect. So then he said that there were families sending letters, entire families, like mom, dad, and little Joey, each sent a letter saying that they hoped the movie flopped because they heard there was an F word.
There's always a contingent of people that are like, Disney is doing Disney wrong.
Right. And then he debunked the big rumor of all, which is, and it's common sense, people would think that the black hole was in reaction to Star Wars, which I would imagine to a degree, the fact that it got greenlit probably was. Same with Star Trek, the motion picture, which came out like 2 weeks before Black Hole. But he said, no, Star Wars was definitely an encouragement, but we were already at work on this. And then he's got the receipts. STARLOG has various memoranda flying around the Disney offices. The earliest one dates back to 1974 when Disney purchased a story called Space Station 1, which is the name of the ship in the black hole. So they got receipts on that. The black hole was not entirely a Star Wars reaction. Dave, let's get into it. The Black Hole is a movie that I never saw it in theaters. I was alive in 1979. But I didn't go, but I remember it being a big deal. I think my cousin had a Black Hole lunchbox. I remember the Black Hole soundtrack record being around other people's homes. I never owned it. Mm-hmm. And by the time I actually watched it, I don't know when I first finally saw it. I looked and it was not on broadcast TV till 1985. It might have been when I saw it then. And the truth of the matter is the Black Hole is not a very good movie. The story momentum is poor. It's just bad. It's boring and bad, but it does have a great deal of merit. First of all, the look is amazing. Both the special effects, all those like displays and the ships, the dashboards on the ship, the robots, Maximilian the robot looks really cool. And some of the performances are quite good. Maximilian Schell. By the way, when I was a little kid and I knew about this, like I knew about it before I ever saw it, because back then there were only so many movies catered toward kids. Right. So I knew that Maximilian Schell was in it. And I knew that the bad robot was called Maximilian. So when I was a little kid, I thought the name Maximilian was the most common name in the world.
There's just a robot and an actor. And it's like, yeah. Everybody.
And like every third guy is named Maximilian, right? And then since then, I've never met a Maximilian in my life. I've met guys named Max, but I've never met a Maximilian. Anyway, Maximilian looks cool. The other robots look cool. The scene when they're shooting, they're playing a game. Basically,
most of the robots look cool. The Vincent Bob design I get, but it is the most Disney thing about the movie.
Yes,
it is. It's a problem. It is a haunted house movie about a witch doctor that creates zombies that is set in space. And all of that, I think, is grand. Like what we're going to hear when we talk to Scott Hughes later in the episode is at this point in time period, we kind of had no idea what black holes were. Like we kind of just realized what to call them. And so this idea is that like it's basically a portal to God or a portal to hell. So we have a mad scientist who's doing all his experiments on the threshold of this portal to hell. All of that's great. In the middle of it, Vincent and Bob are like, you can't beat the old models for accuracy. And then I'm like, is that Slim Pickens? And it is.
Yes. Slim Pickens is Bob. He's all beat up. And Vincent, which is like, it stands for like, I don't know, VIN, virtual, it's an acronym.
Yes.
Vincent is played by Roddy McDowall. So you have Roddy McDowall and Anthony Perkins in the same movie, which is great. Of course, they were in The Life and Time of Judge Roy Bean beforehand. But they are great in still images. Like I remember seeing lobby cards with Vincent and Bob being like, those guys are cool. But the way they moved, because they were tactile, is they moved very slow and they levitated, but they were perfectly aligned. there are action scenes of them and they look terrible. They look like Lost in Space. They're just
my problem is
not
100%
good.
about the eyes and the pupils. I'm like, that's a dumb design thing.
Yeah, you're right.
It makes it Disney, what we would call now Disneyfied. So I get why, why it happened for this thing. But I do think out of I think there's a very interesting horror sci-fi movie here that just has no understanding of physics.
Well, that's fine. That doesn't bother me at all.
I mean, to be fair, neither does Star Wars, but I don't feel it in Star Wars. This movie is like, look at these scientists. And at one point, he's sitting there muttering to himself, Maximilian, and he's like, A squared, sine squared, over X squared. And I'm like, What's happening?
He's just mumbling things like B squared. It's like, what are you doing? It's so good. I mean, imagine you go see Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back's right around the corner. Star Wars is so propulsive and exciting and dynamic, and this is just slow. And the dialogue is stately, and it's like partially sci-fi babble, and then it's like very for kids. Ernest Bernheim is like explaining, well, you have to understand that this is a portal to anywhere. And, it's like, it doesn't know if it's for kids or adults, or it's just all over the map. The action is kind of slow, but the special effects are incredible. The music is great. John Barry's score is so good. Oh my God. And then the last 5 minutes is they go through the black hole, and that looks amazing. That's clearly, they're like, let's try to make it like 2001. And they succeed. They do all kinds of weird camera tricks. It's kind of scary. Like if you're a little kid watching that, I could see you getting your wits scared out of you. Like, I don't know why. There is a good jump scare. There's a face of they remove a mask. And it's funny because it's Anthony Perkins who does it. It's kind of like the last shot of Psycho. When you see the skull, it's a little bit
like the 1920s Phantom of the Opera reveal. Like
right. Yes.
This is a old school, like universal horror movie in space, which is why I actually don't mind it. What's happened between the first time I saw the black hole on a VHS tape and now is, first of all, the stream on Disney Plus looks great. Second of all, I've learned how to appreciate when these companies just spend an obscene amount of money on something that makes no sense. Like I was trying to just count while I was watching the black hole this week, just like non-special effect shots, because we're so used to now, like every movie having 3,000 special effect shots. The black hole has an insane amount of special effect shots for a 1979 movie. So I have I can tune out the dialogue that's kind of nonsense and focus on like the Mondrain influence design of the lines and cables running all over the background and the zombie people. So I think this movie is just short enough that it is visually it visually propels itself through, even when the narrative is like, let's all stop for dinner. They eat salad where he raises in a
mushroom
garden.
soup. They drink mushroom soup. They eat mushroom soup. So it is shockingly weird. I was shocked that it was only 97 minutes. I could have sworn it was 140. There's even an overture. So that's a padded 97.
There's an overture over nothing, over black.
Not even stars.
Again, my first time watching the Disney Plus version, so I'm like, is this wrong? Like, I don't. What they still have not updated it to just a title saying like the black hole, or you're watching the black hole, or get ready for the black hole. Anyway. I have to say, like, I endorse everyone. If you've never watched the black hole, you must. But it's bad. But it's so singular. A black hole is a singularity, right? So it's so singular that you got to see it. It's just a great, weird artifact from a different time. Disney could not have had a renaissance if they didn't first fall apart and make a lot of movies that flopped. And if you're going to flop big, and the black hole is a good example of that. Okay, so Dave, I think our next guest is Professor Scott A. Hughes of M.I.T. Professor Hughes, thank you so much for joining us on the STARLOG podcast. As you know, STARLOG is all about embracing science fiction, but also future life and real science from time to time.
This intersects with me on a lot of different axes, so I'm very happy with this.
And you teach at MIT, and you've held a number of different titles, so impress the listeners real quick. Don't be shy. let us know about some of the titles you've had over the years. Just hit us with a couple of lefts and rights here.
Okay, well, prior to coming to MIT, I was a postdoctoral scholar at a couple of institutions. So I was at the University of Illinois for a little while. Then I went back to my PhD institution where I was postdoctoral scholar and lecturer in the physics department of the California Institute of Technology. I was then a postdoctoral researcher at a place called the Institute for Theoretical Physics, which was on the campus of the University of California in Santa Barbara. While we were there, a rich guy made a big donation, and so now it's called the Kavli Institute for Theoretical Physics.
Thank God for Mr. Kavli. That's great.
Exactly. At that point, I then moved to MIT, and I've been there ever since. So I was an assistant professor, hired and began in January of 2003, got promoted to associate professor, and then full professor a little bit later, and I've had a number of leadership roles along the way. So I was the head of our astrophysics division. We're a big department, and so we're broken up into different research specialties. So I was head astrophysicist for a number of years. And now I am the associate department head of the whole physics department.
You are one of the authorities on black holes, and you were just at an event called the Black Hole Initiative. Can you tell me, like, in the most layman terms you can, what are some of the new discoveries being made? You're learning new things about them every day that we have no idea.
I can answer this in a couple of different ways. So let me sort of explore two things. One is that sort of black holes as astronomical objects, we've learned a tremendous amount about, and black holes as really sort of interesting exemplars of extreme physics. We've been able to probe a lot more in depth over the past, especially over the past decade. So on an astronomical side, people have been talking about black holes as important things in the universe for decades now. Cygnus X1, Rush wrote about them in the 1977, I believe, was when that album came out, right? And so they've been known about since then. And even prior to that, people were trying to understand there's these objects called quasars, which when you look at them carefully through the right kind of telescopes, you basically see that they're just galaxies with something incredibly luminous at their core. And they realize the only way you can get that kind of luminosity is by having matter that falls into a really strong gravitational field such that it gets hot, it begins to radiate, it produces all sorts of interesting outflowing radiation. And so the black hole serves as a mechanism to kind of catalyze E equals mc squared, transform matter into energy and into radiation and sort of drive these outflows. But it was all very qualitative in that sense. And so as a physicist, particularly as someone like me who's a specialist in Einstein's theory of general relativity, we were always interested in trying to understand, can we actually make this precise? We actually can make quantitative predictions of what, in great detail, very precise predictions for what it would be, how these objects would behave, how they interact with their environments, how they interact with each other, if we can make the measurements that would allow us to probe things kind of on really fine spatial scales.
Sure,
really
send a Class A probe from the Enterprise. That makes
things like
sense.
that. Yeah.
So let me just back up for a second. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the term black hole that only started in like the mid 1960s or so.
Right.
Were these phenomenon known about beforehand and just didn't have a name, or were they theorized? This is not something that like Galileo and Copernicus knew about.
No,
it was
that's
much
right.
later, right?
The very first solution we have to back up quite a bit here. So our understanding of gravity, we got it 99% correct when Isaac Newton worked things out in the late 1600s, early 1700s.
What a guy.
Yeah,
what a guy.
He was truly brilliant. I mean, without a doubt. Interesting. If you're interested in science biographies, it's worth reading about him. He was not a nice man, but he apparently, so for a while, he was the exchequer of His Majesty's Treasury. And he wrote in his journal that he took particular delight on days when he got to hang a counterfeiter.
Well, he wanted to see how gravity worked. He wanted to see the body hang and swing, and it was all part of his scientific method.
You may be onto something there. That could be it. Anyway, so he got it roughly right, but it became clear that there were a few niggling details that weren't quite working. In the early 1900s, especially in particular in 1905, Einstein formulated his special theory of relativity, which tells us about things like time dilation, relates the equivalence of energy and matter. And that sort of that arose out of a need to understand how to connect mechanics with electricity and magnetism. They didn't quite fit together well. And I'm basically at this point dancing around the first 3 weeks of a course that I teach this fall. And so I'm going to skip the details. But let's just say they didn't work together. And then Einstein figured out essentially by a couple of overriding postulates, in particular, that all observers measure the speed of light to be the same, independent of what their motion is. Special relativity falls out of that. It became clear, though, that these relativity principles didn't really work with gravity. And so for the next 10 years, Einstein struggled to formulate a way to combine them all together. And it turned out to be kind of a mess. But what emerged after the mess was clarified and cleaned up and put together, and he needed to learn new mathematics to do this, but he wound up with what you call the general theory of relativity. The first person to actually come up with an exact solution describing these things was a guy named Karl Schwarzschild. He was a German Jewish aristocrat.
Not a household name. I thought you were going to say a Kepler or a Hubble or somebody, but no. Yeah.
Karl Schwarzschild got a copy of Einstein's new manuscript. He was busy at the time, and I'll reveal how in just a moment. And just in his spare time, learned the theory, worked out the first exact solution describing this thing, mailed it back to Einstein and said, I've had great joy in sort of taking a walk through the valley of your ideas. He was serving as an artillery officer on the Eastern Front in World War I at the time this happened. And he promptly died of a lung infection that he contracted. So this is the last thing that he did. His solution, we now know, describes exactly a black hole.
Wow.
So that was worked out in 1915. But it took decades for people to really interpret it and understand what's going on because, to be blunt, it's kind of weird. And there's aspects to it that were not well understood.
These things have been proven to exist. This is not theoretical.
This gets into what I think has been really exciting over the past 10 years.
Okay, good.
So this idea that, Schwarzschild's solution here was kind of a triumph. And, I love the story of how it was found as well. I mean, when we were in pandemic days and I was doing remote teaching, I had a bunch of lectures in this subject that I was recording. And the day I derived this solution, I did what Karl Schwarzschild did, and I sort of demonstrated it for the course, for the students in my course. I then told the anecdote I just told you about him serving on the Eastern Front and, dying right after he did this. And he said, and bear in mind, we're in the depths of the pandemic. We were all masked. We weren't allowed to interact with each other. I said, there are days when I wake up and I just don't want to do anything. And I think to myself, what would Karl Schwarzschild do? And I'd say, if he can accomplish that, I can at least put pants on today. That's anyhow. So, we've had this thing. But the predictions of Einstein's gravity and black holes, unless you're measuring things that are really close to where the black hole, where all the action is happening, Newton's gravity actually works quite well. It's such a good approximation that it works for a lot of the observations we can do until we get the technology that really probes close to these things, or where we look at two of them interacting with one another. And this is where the discoveries over the past 10 or 15 years have really come into play, because we've developed instrumentation and measurement techniques that push us into this regime where we are seeing, and as I like to say when we're talking about gravitational waves, in some cases hearing things that we've never been able to tell before. And so in particular, when you have two black holes that orbit each other, that merge, they coalesce, and they form a new black hole, the theory of general relativity makes very specific predictions for how, if it is a black hole exactly as we expect it to be, something with an event horizon, the surface that nothing can ever come out of, the signal can only behave in a certain way. And when we measure it and we compare it with our models, it is dead on correct.
So some of the new technologies are just like bigger and better radio telescopes?
Some of them are telescopes. Some of them are the gravitational wave detectors, the thing that Thorne won the Nobel Prize for, or shared the Nobel Prize for. This is a way of using gravitational waves as a way of studying directly interacting astronomical objects. It's what I did my PhD on. It's been a technology that has been in development since the 1970s, but the public became aware of a lot of this in 2015, really 2016, when the first discoveries occurred and were then announced.
So I know that a lot of the work you're doing is in prep for a project called L.I.S.A, L-I.S.A,
yes,
which is a joint NASA ESA project. Can you tell me a little bit about what the L.I.S.A is And there's something else called the L.I.G.O. Does that exist already? Is L.I.G.O.
L.I.G.O. is where these discoveries have come from. So L.I.G.O. stands for the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory.
Okay, so L.I.S.A. is kind of like the sequel to L.I.G.O.
Yeah,
to
you
a
can
certain
kind of
degree.
think of that. So, the basic idea here is that when gravitational waves pass through any object, they act like, so one of the ways that gravity acts is as a tide. So the moon orbits our Earth, and there's sort of a force from the moon and the force from the Earth, and they exactly balance at the centers of mass of these objects. But then there's a little bit of variation. And so what happens is the face of the Earth that is pointing at the moon feels a little bit more gravity from the moon than a bit that's, a little bit away from that.
Sure.
The side that's directly opposite feels a little less gravity because it balances right at the center. And so what happens is that means that the Earth bulges a little bit towards the moon, or along a line towards the moon, both on the side that's closest to the moon and on the side that's farthest away from the moon. That's called the tide. That's why the oceans rise and fall every day.
This makes sense. The way you've just described, finally understand. I now understand the tides for the first time in my life.
Excellent. And because, it's got to go somewhere, the directions that are 9 degrees away from it actually kind of goes in a little bit. So you get this sort of oscillating stretch and squeeze as the Earth sort of rotates underneath the moon. Gravitational waves act in a way that's very similar. You get this kind of stretch and squeeze, but it happens on a much smaller time scale. So it might, like the kind of signals that L.I.G.O. measures, it might oscillate a few hundred times a second. It's exactly the same frequency band as what the human ear can hear. And so we get these little oscillations, but they're incredibly small. So if I have two test masses, just two objects that are completely insulated from all sources of noise, and they're just sort of separated from one another by, let's say this distance is actually 2.5 miles. The amount by which the tide would stretch and squeeze them, they would kind of, let me do it like this so you can see it a little bit better. So they would kind of be oscillating like this, but the amount of oscillation is smaller than the size of an atomic nucleus. So you need incredibly precise measurement techniques to pull that out. And you are sensitive to, like, if a gnat sneezes, that could be a source of noise, right? And so you have to be really carefully isolated from all your noise.
So this new system called L.I.S.A., which stands for
Laser Interferometer Space Antenna.
And it's not just, it's going up in stages. It's not just like they're shooting a new telescope to the orbit. It's like multiple different things that have to be constructed in space and all that.
So L.I.G.O. has been done. That is on the ground. That is operating now. And that sort of worked out the bugs in a lot of this technology and demonstrated how it works in this band that corresponds roughly to human audio. That turns out to give us sensitivity to gravitational wave events involving things like black holes and neutron stars, things whose masses are similar to our sun and somewhat more massive stars, up to about 20 or 30 or 40 times the mass of the sun. L.I.S.A., by going into space, what that allows you to do is to make the baseline between the members of the sort of the measurement system much larger. So in L.I.G.O., you have lasers that are monitoring the separation of these masses, and they're literally 2.5 miles apart. So you have this vacuum system that's 4 kilometers of pipe, basically.
Wow.
They're arranged in an L. So I have an arm here, and I have an arm here. And that L means that you're really sensitive to this sort of tidal. Like if I stretch along this axis, I squeeze along this one. And I get this kind of oscillation like that when a signal comes through. But it's on a baseline of about 2.5 miles. By going into space, L.I.S.A. will work on a baseline that's more like 1 million miles. Okay. So what you do is you have multiple spacecraft that kind of move in a pattern that looks like a little triangular constellation. You monitor the relative separation of them. And one of the main benefits of going into space, along with making the distances a lot longer, which helps with the measurement problem, is you're sensitive to you can go to much lower frequencies. It actually goes below the human audio. And that gives you sensitivity to much more massive objects. So L.I.G.O. is measuring 10, 20, 100 solar mass black holes. L.I.S.A. will measure 1 million solar mass black holes. And that ties to the other thing we've learned a lot about, which is that there are a crapload of million solar mass black holes in the universe.
So and this will all be done, God willing, in about a decade. This will be ready to go.
As my friends from the Arab world would say, inshallah, in about a decade. Right. Yes.
Okay. Very good. Let me pretend for a minute that I am a crusty member of parliament or senator. What, if any, are the practical benefits of creating a L.I.S.A other than just that it's cool to know about black holes? What if I am looking at dollars and cents, if I'm one of those jerks who says everything in science has to have a practical application, are there any for this?
I mean, in terms of absolutely direct application of what we learn from it, not a ton. It's an it's a telescope, and it provides the same, information that we get when we make a big telescope and we point it at the sky. We do it, though, because we get a lot of technology development coming out of it when you make something that can make measurements as precise as this. So there's indirect benefit that comes out of it. The LIGO measurements, which I have already mentioned, part of the way that they make laser interferometers that can determine length changes as small as this is by they've invented a technique for stabilizing the frequency of a laser that is more powerful than anything that had ever been done before. And it's now got huge industrial applications, right? And so if you took 2% worth of royalties off of all of that thing, it would probably pay for the project 6 times over.
I mean, the classic example is Velcro, right? Velcro was an unexpected ancillary good of creating the NASA Apollo program.
I would also say, in addition to, I sort of talked a little bit about the fact that you get a lot of things that you learn from it that are useful. The other thing is that you train an army of people with deep expertise. Many of them don't, they do their PhDs and they say, I want to do something else. And then they go off and they take that expertise, they take that creativity, and it feeds into the economy. It feeds into your society. Yeah. And, to me, that is why you keep these kind of things going. I mean, it's this may not have been the best analogy, but I once described physics and astrophysics in particular as like a gateway drug for smart kids to sort of get into doing great things.
Talking about your work, I am curious about how you got on this track. The most famous black holes out there, Sagittarius A is the one in the center of the Milky Way. Is that the reason why the Milky Way is a disk, because of the gravity of Sagittarius? Oh, do a lot of people think that, though?
So the reason the Milky Way is a disk is that it's because it has angular momentum. It spins. So all the stars in it actually orbit around something. So there are other galaxies that are not disks that have an elliptical shape.
That has nothing to do with the fact that because we have a black hole in the center. It's like, think of a record where like the hole in the Do all galaxies have?
That's actually kind of one of the other things I want to say about what's been so exciting over the past 15 or 20 years is that we have found black holes at the cores of almost every galaxy where we can look. It just seems like at the center, that's where crap runs downhill, right? And so you go to the place where the gravity is strongest and everything kind of falls in, and they tend to have a huge black hole at their core. And so the Event Horizon Telescope has given us pictures of 2 black holes so far. One at the center of our galaxy, which has got a mass of about 4 million solar masses. One at the center of the galaxy M.I.T, which has a mass of about 6 billion times the mass of the sun. It's actually a factor of almost 1,500 times larger. That galaxy is not a disk a spiral-like disk like ours. It's actually a big sort of spheroidal poof.
Do you think over time we'll discover that all galaxies have a black hole? Like that's part of you need to have a black hole at the center to be a galaxy, or?
I'm going to sort of plead the fifth on this one because this is really, it's active research. One of the things that the James Webb Space Telescope is doing is they're looking at galaxies and they're looking at sources that have black holes that are farther and farther out, that are sort of closer to the initial moment where stars were first formed. And, one of the real questions is, are there black holes in some of those things? They're such weird structures. You can't call them galaxies. You might call them proto-galaxies. And so do they have black holes in them? It appears almost certain that many of them do. And figuring out how they're born is, like I said, I'm pleading the fifth.
Your journey to becoming Mr. Black Hole starts at some point. You are, for those who have chosen to listen to this podcast on YouTube, you are wearing a Rush t-shirt. And right now, the greatest Canadian prog rock band is back. They're on tour for the first time in 13 years, something like that.
That's about right, yeah.
It's funny that you and I met through the internet because I wrote an article, a rather lengthy article, of ranking every single Rush track available on Spotify at the time.
I read that whole damn thing. I loved it.
It took me weeks and weeks and weeks to do, and you reached out and we started corresponding. So Rush as a band, I mean, it sounds like a joke. We talk about people at NASA that are into Star Trek. people that are teaching astrophysics at MIT tend to be into Rush. Why is it the case with you? What do you love about the band Rush so much?
Yeah, so Rush. Okay, so the full story. I grew up in the 80s, graduated from high school in 1989. And, I came from a relatively low-income family. My dad was working class. My mom, neither of my parents went to college. And so, I couldn't buy a lot of music, didn't have a lot of money for it, that kind of a thing. And so I tended to be exposed through various friends. And so when I was growing up, I'd hear Tom Sawyer on the radio or something like that. And it was good, but, I didn't make as much of an impression on me. What really lit it up was I was on this... So here's really pulling my nerd cred out of the pocket. I was on a science bowl team in my high school, and one of my fellow teammates, he brought a boombox with him and a bunch of CDs, and he put 2112 on. Oh, yeah. And it was in my lap, and I was just kind of blown away. And I remember, I dug out what money I did have saved up, got a ride to the mall, and hang on just a second.
Oh, no,
I need to pull this out. Hang on.
Yeah.
This could be anything. I'm so excited.
There it is.
Yeah.
This is what I bought at the mall.
On gorgeous plate of vinyl, not a CD, not a cassette, an actual record.
I had
a
record player at home. Yeah. We didn't have, a relatively poor family. We didn't have CD players, and I kind of knew that tapes would wear out after a while. So I actually went and bought the vinyl, and I listened to it. I quickly discovered that if I didn't put headphones on, my mom was going to yell at me. So, I had on headphones. And, it was as good as I remembered on the bus. But then it was the last track on side 2, Something for Nothing, that I listened to that and I just went, wait a minute. And I put the needle back and I listened to it again. And I listened to it again. And I listened to it again. I think I probably listened to that song 12 or 15 times in a row. And the reason why that really spoke to me so much there, I'm pulling up just to make sure I get the lyrics exactly right. It was this line in, what you live is your own story. In your head is the answer. Let it guide you along. Let your heart be the anchor and the beat of your song. The whole song is about you can't just sit there and wait for good things to drop in your lap. You have to get off your ass.
Can't have freedom for free.
You can't have. Oh my God. Yes, exactly. Exactly. You don't get wise with the sleep still in your eyes, no matter what the dream might be. And that it so contradicted what I had been hearing in my home life for much of my life. My mom and my dad were wonderful people, but they were a little bit beaten down, I think, by being relatively lower middle class in a town that had a lot of more wealthy people around. I mean, I remember when I was starting to apply for colleges, my mom would say, we're not going to be able to afford anything. If you're lucky, you'll get something, you'll be able to go to Penn State. And I just wanted to be able to, explore around a little bit more. And I talked about financial aid programs, and I'll never forget her saying, people like that don't help people like us. And this song just sort of, and then when I went to college, I remember, so first of all, I just started applying to places that I wasn't allowed to. And we got financial aid, it turns out. It turns out people like that did help people like us. And, I really think that is the thing. I worked really hard when I was in college. I knew this was an opportunity I couldn't waste. And again, you don't get wise with the sleep still in your eyes. I kept thinking that over and over and over as a 19-year-old, 18-year-old, 19-year-old. And it really kind of kicked me that's the song that pushed me into Rush fandom. And at that point, I started getting a lot of other things.
I mean, it's funny because, Rush lyrics are a topic that get mocked a little bit from time to time. I mean, certainly the earlier work in 2112 is part of that. The first side of 2112 is an entire suite. It's a mini rock opera. Yeah, it's all very goofy and stuff. But when you're a kid, it hits hard.
It hits hard. And what I kind of love about it and why it's funny because, every now and then I just, you listen to something for a long, long time and you're like, okay, this is great. I just need to do something else. I find myself over the decades keep coming back to Rush because they really lean into that earnestness in such a way. Yeah. It feels so genuine, and it really, there are numerous songs of theirs that just have hit in a different way as I've gotten older over the years.
Yeah. And then musically, I mean, there's a section of By Torn the Snow Dog where it's all like I believe it's just like a mathematical formula almost that you're hearing.
Yeah.
And then also the song YYZ, which is of course the airport code for Toronto, the band's home base.
Yep,
it's
Morse
done in
coding
Morse
it out.
code. And it took me I never knew that for years. I just knew it had this great riff. I'm like, oh, it's Morse code for YYZ. Of course it is.
Right,
Why did I
right.
never know that before? Because this is before the internet and no one told me.
Another one of their songs that really hits home for me is the Analog Kid. I kind of feel like that's a song that's like, it's the anthem of a first generation kid. And I love, so, you know, the when you get to the bridge, you know, when I leave, I don't know what I'm hoping to find. And when I leave, I don't know what I'm leaving behind. That just so expressed the way I felt moving away from home and kind of going out in this new world. But then it's followed by one of my favorite solos of Alex. There's this sort of frenetic, almost anxious and yet excited feeling to it that I think just really captures the emotions that go into, especially that final bridge section of it. And, you know, that's another one that it just, for some reason, I sort of knew it years ago, but I was just re-listening to it a couple of years ago. And I went, oh my God, this just, you know, I'm involved in this program at M.I.T. for students who are the first people in their family to go to college. And I kind of felt like, people need to hear this song, man. This is about them.
That's awesome. Dave, are you a Rush fan? I've never asked you this question.
I mean, I do like Rush, but like I went to space camp the same year Tool's Anima came out, so my prog rock and my
A little
space
younger.
are
Okay.
similar but different.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Tool's great. But
By
you
the
know
way,
the
I believe that was you have Deep Space Nine on your mug.
I do,
Is
yeah.
that
I have
right?
a Deep Space Nine on my
There
mug.
you go. I thought I
the
saw that in the
wormhole
background.
lights up as it's hot, but it is cooled down, so we only have DS9 now.
There you
the
go.
only known stable wormhole connecting the Gamma Quadrant.
I was a big fan of Deep Space Nine when I was in graduate school. I watched that all the time. And so, you know, that the portrayal of the wormhole in there, I mean, it was a MacGuffin for science fiction, but it was
Sure.
decent. They did a good, you know, I was happy with that.
So let's wrap it up a little bit and talk one more time about Rush, because the group Rush did record more than one song in which the Black Hole Cygnus X1 plays a major theme.
Yeah.
Were you already on your path? Were you already studying to become an astrophysicist? Or did this kind of guide you? Did the gravity of this song propel you in any way toward your ultimate
I heard
destination?
this song. So I've been interested in black holes in space since I was a little kid. When I really started getting into Rush, I wasn't sure what kind of science I wanted to do. And so it's kind of funny. I mean, I've sort of come back to it in a very, it's almost random that I kind of came back to that. If you had asked me when I was 19 what kind of physics I wanted to do, I would have given you a very different answer. And then if I was 20, I would have given you yet another different answer. And you know, the way I ended up finally becoming somebody who was a black hole specialist, one thing I kind of discovered as I worked with in various groups, as I did a little bit of undergraduate research, talked with different people, met a lot of graduate students. And I realized that when you do a PhD and you really go in depth with a subject, you're going to be working closely with someone for 5 or 6 years. And the best advice I got was, no matter how cool the science is, if the person you're working for is an asshole, you are not going to like it.
Wow. Nothing to do with the pure science at all, the mathematics of it. It's all about personality.
Exactly.
At this level of the game. Yeah.
And so when I ended up visiting, I got into a couple really good programs, and it was visiting Caltech and talking and meeting with Kip Thorne and his research group. And he basically said he would take me on as a student. And I was just like, I don't know if I'm going to stay with this or not, but this is the guy I want to work with.
Wow. That's awesome.
And that's how, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I've gone back to Rush.
That's so funny. Well, folks, you did it. You just spent another hour with Dave Gonzalez and Jordan Hoffman, hosts of the STARLOG Podcast. We thank you for listening, and thank you so much to Professor Scott Hughes for that awesome discussion about black holes. Let's talk about next week. From outer space and the mysteries of space-time, we're going to go to inner space and have a conversation with Daniel Noah, a very interesting chap who has just released a graphic novel called High Strangeness. Daniel Lo, of course, is also a film producer. He's a co-founder of SpectraVision, which means he's got all those cool podcasts on the SpectraVision network. He produced films like Mandy, Color Out of Space, A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and one of my favorites, The Greasy Strangler. So you want to be around next week to hear our interview. Until then, we'll see you out there in orbit.